This is the giant anteater. It's the largest anteater in the world, stretching up to 7 feet long from snout to tail, which is taller than most people standing upright. Everyone's heard of anteaters in passing, maybe from a zoo visit or a nature documentary, but what most people don't know is that the giant anteater isn't the only anteater in the world, because evolution decided to create this exact same animal over and over again, on different continents, in different families, across completely different branches of the tree of life, until we ended up with roughly a dozen animals that are all, functionally, just anteaters. We're not talking about distant cousins that kind of look alike. We're talking about animals that independently evolved the exact same long snout, the exact same sticky, elongated tongue, the exact same powerful digging claws, and the exact same diet of ants and termites, with zero collaboration, zero shared recent ancestry, and in some cases, zero geographic overlap. And since this channel is about the Amazon, we're gonna start right here in our own backyard because the Amazon basin alone contains 3 separate species of anteater. 3 in one jungle. And none of them are particularly closely related to each other in the grand scheme of things. So how does evolution keep writing the same blueprint? Why does nature look at the anteater design and just refuse to stop using it? And what would it take for a 13th version of this animal to appear? Even though these are the only animals that most people picture when they hear the word anteater, if you actually take a close look, the 3 Amazonian species are totally unmistakably different to anyone who spends enough time in this ecosystem. And for some reason, that person is me. All 3 Amazonian anteaters, the giant anteater, the silky anteater, and the southern tamandua, share a common ancestor, likely a primitive insectivorous mammal that lived somewhere around 60 million years ago, right after the extinction of the dinosaurs created a vacuum of ecological opportunity that mammals rushed to fill. But in reality, we can't confirm the exact details because the fossil record for soft-nosed, clawed insect specialists isn't exactly generous. Snouts don't fossilize cleanly. Tongues definitely don't. What we do get are fragmentary jawbones and the occasional skull fragment that hints at an elongating rostrum, a snout slowly stretching forward over millions of years toward its eventual absurd length. At some point after the age of dinosaurs, the ancient insectivorous mammal lineage that would become true anteaters diverged and produced the 3 forms we see in the Amazon today. The giant anteater took the terrestrial route: ground level, open grassland and forest floor, no climbing, maximum size. The tamandua went semi-arboreal, spending time both in the trees and on the ground, mid-sized, adaptable. And the silky anteater went fully arboreal, tiny, slow, spending its entire life in the canopy, almost never touching the ground. 3 different species, 3 different niches, all using the same core design: elongated snouts, long sticky tongue, reduced or absent teeth, powerful claws, diets of social insects. What's interesting is that while all 3 species share the same basic toolkit, they didn't inherit their specific adaptations from one perfectly evolved shared ancestor. Each species refined the anteater design independently to suit its own niche. A textbook example of what scientists call adaptive radiation layered on top of convergent evolution. Adaptive radiation is when one ancestral lineage rapidly diversifies into multiple forms to fill available ecological roles. But convergent evolution is the bigger and weirder story here. Because the anteater design didn't just evolve once inside the Amazon, it evolved across the entire planet in completely unrelated animals over and over again until nature had essentially reinvented the same creature at least a dozen times. You probably know about pangolins, But if you watched our video on mimicomorphism, you'd know that convergent evolution producing the same animal in different lineages isn't actually that surprising once you understand the logic behind it. Pangolins are found across Africa and Asia. They have no recent common ancestor with South American anteaters. Their last shared relative was a small genderless mammal living in the shadow of the dinosaurs. And yet, put a pangolin next to a giant anteater and the overlap is almost uncomfortable. Long tapered snout, sticky tongue that can extend longer than the animal's own head, no functional teeth, massive digging claws, exclusive diet of ants and termites. The pangolin even has scales instead of fur, which you'd think would make it look completely alien by comparison, but somehow the overall silhouette still reads as anteater from 20 feet away. Then there's the aardvark. The aardvark is so genetically isolated that it sits entirely alone in its own taxonomic order, Tubuli dentata, with no living relatives. Its closest living relatives are things like elephants and hyraxes, which look absolutely nothing like it. And yet the aardvark has a long pig-like snout, a tongue that can reach over a foot in length, coated in sticky saliva, reduced peg-like teeth that are functionally useless, enormous digging claws, and it eats ants and termites every single night across the African savanna. Evolution looked at Africa, looked at the available food source of social insects living in fortified underground nests, and produced an aardvark, the same way it looked at South America and produced a giant anteater, the same way it looked at Asia and produced a pangolin. Different continents, different starting materials, same result. So why does this keep happening? Why does nature look at the anteater body plan and refuse to stop building it? The answer is the food source. Ants and termites together represent one of the most abundant concentrations of animal protein on Earth. In the Amazon basin alone, termite mounds and ant colonies collectively outweigh all the mammals in the forest combined. This is an enormous, self-replenishing, geographically distributed food source that almost nothing can efficiently access, because getting into a fortified insect nest requires specialized equipment that most animals simply don't have. A long enough snout to probe the tunnels. The moment an animal lineage develops even early versions of these tools, it essentially unlocks an exclusive food source with almost no competition. And evolution doesn't pass that up, ever. On any continent where social insects built colonies and no efficient specialist predator yet existed, the local fauna started getting pushed toward the anteater solution. It's not that nature is being lazy or unimaginative, it's that the anteater design works so well for the specific ecological problem that once you start moving toward it, the advantages compound. Every incremental improvement to the snout, the tongue, the claws, makes the animal more efficient at accessing a food source that only it can reach. So natural selection keeps rewarding every step in that direction, on every continent, in every lineage flexible enough to make the journey. But since their environments aren't exactly the same, these animals didn't end up completely identical. Take a close look at the 3 Amazon species side by side, and you see exactly how the same blueprint gets tuned for different conditions. The giant anteater is the terrestrial specialist, up to 7 feet long, over 80 pounds, built for covering large distances across open forest floors and grassland edges. It has no climbing ability whatsoever, a trade-off it made in exchange for sheer size and ground-level power. Its front claws are so large that it actually walks on its knuckles like a gorilla, because the claws are too long to lay flat on the ground. It can demolish a termite mound in seconds that took the colony months to build. Giant anteaters are solitary, slow-moving, and almost completely silent, a ghost of the forest floor that most people who live in the Amazon never see in their entire lives. The tamandua, on the other hand, made a completely different set of trade-offs. Medium-sized, maybe 10 to 15 pounds, with a prehensile tail that works as a fifth limb in the canopy, The tamandua split the difference between ground and tree, giving it access to arboreal ants and termite colonies that the giant anteater could never reach, while still being large enough to handle ground-level mounds when the opportunity arises. Its claws are proportionally huge for its body size, a requirement for the same ecological job scaled down. And it has a reputation in the Amazon for being surprisingly aggressive when cornered, capable of inflicting serious lacerations with those claws despite being roughly the size of a small dog. Then there's the silky anteater, the pygmy of the group. Barely the size of a squirrel, fully arboreal, almost never seen because it spends its days curled up inside a cecropia leaf looking like a particularly fluffy seed pod. The silky anteater gave up size entirely in exchange for total canopy specialization. It feeds almost exclusively on arboreal ant species that no other anteater can efficiently reach, and its small size means it needs relatively few of them. It moves in slow motion through the treetops, not because it's sluggish by nature, but because slow movement is an energy conservation strategy when you weigh less than half a pound. 3 species, 3 completely different size classes, 3 different vertical levels of the same forest, all using the same core design, all refined independently to dominate their specific slice of the insect food web. This is convergent evolution and adaptive radiation happening simultaneously in the same ecosystem, and the Amazon is one of the only places on Earth complex enough to support all 3 versions at once. But the larger story is the 12, because beyond the Amazon's 3, you have pangolins, 8 species across Africa and Asia, each a variation on the same theme. You have the aardvark, alone in Africa, doing the same job. You have the numbat in Australia, a marsupial that convergently evolved a long sticky tongue and ant specialist diet from completely different starting material. You have the echidna, a monotreme, one of the most ancient mammal lineages on Earth, which independently evolved an elongated snout and sticky tongue for termite feeding. And scattered through the fossil record, you find extinct lineages that made it part way toward the anteater design before disappearing. Early mammals with partially elongated snouts, reduced dentition, and thickened claws that suggest they were moving in the right direction but never quite completed the journey. What's also interesting is that all these animals convergently evolved reduced or absent teeth for the same fundamental reason. Teeth are expensive to build and maintain. When your food is tiny, soft-bodied, and consumed in massive quantities rather than individually wrestled into submission, a full set of teeth become useless weight. The tongue and the stomach's muscular gizzard-like region take over the mechanical processing work instead. So every lineage that committed to the anteater diet eventually reached the same conclusion. Teeth are a waste. Spend that developmental budget on tongue length instead. But what would happen if you introduced a giant anteater population to a pangolin's territory in Africa? Would they start competing directly? Would one outcompete the other? Well, they actually target slightly different insect species and use slightly different foraging strategies. Giant anteaters tend to make brief explosive raids on large mounds, while pangolins are more methodical and patient. In practice, they'd probably partition the available food source more than they'd directly compete. Evolution already figured out in the Amazon that you can fit 3 anteater species into the same forest if they use different levels and different approaches. And this is exactly what makes the anteater design so durable. If they converge on the same blueprint and it works, they'll usually share the same weaknesses too. And in the Amazon, the biggest shared vulnerability is habitat loss. Every single anteater species globally is either threatened or declining. Giant anteaters are classified as vulnerable. Pangolins are the most trafficked mammals on Earth. Aardvark populations are shrinking as savanna gets converted. Evolution spent 60 million years reinventing this animal 12 separate times, and we're threatening most of those versions simultaneously. Convergent evolution isn't really about nature being repetitive or running out of ideas. It's that the anteater design solves a real and specific problem better than anything else ever invented. We've seen this same pattern in other groups. Sharks and dolphins converging on the same torpedo shape for fast swimming, even though one is a fish and one is a mammal. Birds and bats both independently evolving wings from completely different starting structures. Even in Australia, the thylacine evolved to look nearly identical to a wolf, despite being a marsupial. The anteater just happens to be one of the most extreme examples because the insect food source is so abundant, so global, and so consistently locked behind the same set of biological locks that evolution keeps producing the same key over and over on every continent that offers the problem. So what would it take for a 13th anteater to evolve? Basically the same conditions that made the first 12. You need an ecosystem with abundant social insects in fortified nests, a mammal lineage flexible enough to elongate its snout and reduce its teeth, and enough time without a competing specialist already occupying that niche. And honestly, we might already be seeing early versions of that happening in some specialized rodent lineages showing dietary shifts towards social insects in Southeast Asia. Nowhere near a committed anteater yet, but you can start to see the pressure building. The food is there, the niche is open, and evolution has shown 12 times now exactly what it intends to do about that. Thank you guys so much for all the support on this channel. Leave me a comment with anything you want covered about the Amazon. I read every single one. And if you want to see our video on the prehistoric Amazon and the giants that used to rule it, check it out here.